Okay, what's the brokest you've ever been? Oh, okay, one time I was in LA, I had $4 to my name until payday. So? Been there lots of times. Dude, I didn't have any food. I'd already borrowed money from everyone I knew. All right. Well, I really wanted a cappuccino, but I knew I had to eat. And this Chinese food place had a $4 lunch special. You did a Dine and Dash? No way, dude. Dine and Dash is so basic. I went way more broke than that, right? I get my tofu chow mein, and I sit down at the table, and there's this giant hair right in the noodles. Never send food back. I don't trust the kitchen not to mess with it. But I didn't take it back. Not right away. First, I ate all around the hair until I was nice and full. Then I take my plate up to the counter and I tell her, look, I feel sick, I ate all this food, and then I find this big nasty hair in it. She gives me back my $4, I tip her $1, and I'm on my way. Gross. You are disgusting. Yeah, maybe, but that cappuccino was delicious. Ow! Don't you have a comedy special to tape? Oh, yeah, I'm late. I gotta go. I want to thank you, each and every one of you, for leaving your homes. It's a bold choice you've made, and I appreciate it very much. Good for you. I know you have other options. And I think that you should be proud of yourselves. I think that's who you are as people. You're the people that will leave their homes. You're the people who will leave their homes to go out to a funky show on a college campus at a venue with "of the arts" in its name. To see a comedian who doesn't even have a sitcom. So that makes you my favorite kind of people. But now you've done it. You're here, right? Yeah. You want this to be a magical experience, right? Yeah. All right, well, it just so happens that the magic is already here in the room with us. And all you have to do is participate and we can grab a hold of it. Are you willing to do that? Yeah! All right, so every one of you right now, what I want you to do is just get your hands up over your heads. The magic was right there over your heads the whole time. Keep them up, because the nature of magic is that if you start wiggling your fingers, the magic will get tangled around them. That's the way magic works. And now you've got it really tangled up in there, we can just pull it down on top of ourselves. Let's do it. Let's just pull the magic down. Do you feel it? I feel it. Let's do this. Hello, my name's Keith Lowell Jensen, and I write autobiographical fan fiction. Cool, glad there are some fans of the genre. This is my job. It's pretty neat. This wasn't always my job. I used to be a kid. And when I was a kid, I wanted a job. I wanted a job so bad. And then you gotta wait. They don't let you have one until you're 16. And then the high school will give you a work permit. So when you're 15, you're so close. You know, and you're just champing at the bit for that job. That's when you just taste it. And it's funny to remember that now, how badly I wanted that job. Because all I want now is to never have a job again. Just done with that. But then I was desperate, and a friend said to me, hey Keith, you know, they'll hire you at the golf course, and they don't require a work permit. I said, oh, that sounds pretty good. So I went down to the golf course, I walked into the pro shop, and I asked for an application, which is how we used to get a job. We got a thing on paper, some of you are still confused. What paper is, there was this smashed, bleached wood pulp, and you would make magic symbols on it with an ink wand. It was an amazing time to be alive, and that could get you gainful employment. It was incredible. So I got the application, and I try to be real cool, and I say to the guy, I heard that it's okay if I don't have a work permit. Is that true? And he says, well, I don't know. See, I heard that I don't have to pay you minimum wage. Is that true? And I was like, yeah. And I got the job at the golf course, my first job. Real quick, by sound of applause. Do we have any golfers here tonight? All right. More than I would have liked. But they don't outnumber us, so we're good. And I say that because golfers are terrible, terrible people. And I wouldn't make such a claim as that without proof. I'm going to start telling you about my job there, and if you watch anyone near you that clapped that they were a golfer, they're going to get what I'm talking about a little bit earlier than the rest of you. And it's going to be a pleasant memory for them. I said, what do I do now, Ed? What do I do for a living? And Ed says, well, we got this ATV out here, and you get to drive it, and it's got a little trailer on it, and it's going to scoop up the golf balls while you drive it back and forth across the range. Yeah, that's hilarious, isn't it? It's already gone. I go out to the ATV, and it has a cage around it. I said, Ed, that's great. At 15, you're just excited to drive anything, but why's it got a cage around it? He said, oh, well, the range is actually in use while you're cleaning it. So occasionally, one of the balls will hit you on accident. The words occasionally and on accident are the lies in that sentence. Those were the untruths. I get in the ATV and I start driving it, scooping up some golf balls, and boom, 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 golf balls are smashing into this cage. They're hitting me every chance they get. They were like, oh, new guy, get him, fresh meat. And the cage is incredibly close to my face. They didn't leave a lot. It's a very jumpy situation, which only encourages them. So after a few weeks, I learned to not react, which was what you needed to do. Because once you could ignore them, took a little fun out of it for them, and they weren't quite so gung-ho. I'm out there one day doing it, and there's a guy on the range who must have been a professional golfer. And he is just hitting ball after ball after ball straight into the cage right at head level. Boom, 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 with incredible force. The balls are hitting the cage so hard that the balls are starting to get stuck in the links of the cage. And I'm worried that a ball is gonna hit one of the balls, and it's gonna ricochet it in and crack me in the skull. I look and he has 3 of them in a row. I was like, tic-tac-toe, man, stop. You won. Let's cut it. So it was unnerving, to say the least. And then I hear a moment of silence. I have a small reprieve. I'm like, he's gearing up. And I swear I heard the club slice through the air. I heard it smack loudly against the ball, and I heard the ball come whistling in like a nuclear missile in one of those 80s nuclear Holocaust movies. And I'm bracing, just waiting for the day after, And the ball hits the cage, and it hits the frame of the cage with this universe-shattering, loud ping of a noise, this horrible metallic sound. And I let go of the steering mechanism, and my little cart goes off course, and I have to grab it and jerk it back, and I put the brakes on, and I look at the guy. And I'm just a kid. I'm just a scared kid. And I'm thinking that this adult human will see that and maybe feel bad. And say, sorry kid, my bad, I'll stop. But instead, he pumps his fist and lifts his knee like Tiger Woods. Yes! Getting a hole-in-one. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is when I lost my temper. And I started to yell. And as I was yelling, I found myself pointing at him. Only not so much at him as kind of up. Both hands, and not really using the traditional pointing finger. And a torrent of obscenity is flowing out of my mouth. I yelled every curse word that I knew, which was most of them, because we had cable. I was so mad, I called him a white guy. It's like, you white guy! You ever been so angry you forget your own ethnicity? And when I'm done spewing this filth at a customer, I look at the other golfers, wondering who's gonna have my back. And they all start laughing, and then they all start applauding, and then they all start raining golf balls down upon me. Every one of them. Just ball after ball after ball. The whole range focused on me with incredible speed. They were high-fiving each other. They were forming friendships. They were sending their children to the pro shop to get more buckets of balls so that they didn't have to stop. And these are just coming down on me. You know when there's a really bad hailstorm? How do they describe it? They say they were golf ball-sized pieces of hail. Well, these were golf ball-sized pieces of golf ball. This was my Vietnam, people. I still wake up in a cold sweat having nightmares from that experience. She's like, my wife's like, what is it? I was like, there are balls everywhere. She's like, the golf course or the other one? I was like, the golf course, baby. The golf course. You see, I'm upset. And I couldn't even cut and run because I'd already cursed out a golfer. I knew I was in trouble. I wasn't going to get in more trouble by showing up back at the clubhouse without my baskets full of golf balls. So I'm driving back and forth trying to get enough golf balls. Luckily, they were supplying them. And then finally, I have enough, and I go pulling in, and I see my boss standing in my parking spot waiting for me. And I'm fired, I assume. My first job. I was so happy to finally have a job, and I'm gonna get canned. I park, and I start apologizing before I even open the cage door. Ed, I'm so sorry. I swing it open, I jump out. Listen, there was a guy out there. I think he's a professional. He was just whacking ball after ball right in my head. It was terrible. I won't let it happen again. And Ed says to me, Keith. What just happened out there, what you just did out there, on my range, on my watch, that was amazing. Can you do that every time? We've never rented so many buckets of balls in one afternoon, ever. I said, yeah, I can. And so that's what I tell people when they ask what my first showbiz gig was. Of course, I did still manage to get fired. Yeah, it was a month or two later, I got fired on Christmas Day. Yeah, of course the range is open on Christmas Day. I told you, golfers are terrible people. Christmas morning, just have fun with your toys, kid. I gotta go torture someone else's kid. They got him in a cage, it's great. Catch up with you later. Merry Christmas. I was at home. My brothers were up visiting from Southern California. I was having a good time, stuffing chocolate in my face, checking out my new skateboard. My brother Eric says to me, Keith, so proud of you. I can't believe you have a job at your age. That's amazing. I said, oh, thanks, Eric. Oh, dang, I was supposed to be there like 3 hours ago. Can you give me a ride? So Eric put me in his truck, and he drove me to get fired from the job he was so proud of me for having. I went in, and they had my last paycheck already ready for me. I'd never been fired before. I didn't know the ritual. I would get intimately acquainted with it over time. But this was my first occasion, And it turns out they print your paycheck for you. They have it ready for you because they are never as considerate of you and your needs as when they're canning you. Because they're relinquishing power over you and they don't want you to make a scene. And they have this thing that they say, which again, I'd never heard it before. I've heard it many times now. They all say it the same. Some genius in human resources came up with this. They slide the envelope over and they say, "I'm sorry, we won't be needing you anymore." Like I said, I've heard that a lot of times, but that was the first time I had ever heard it. And the way they worded that, "We won't be needing you anymore," just hit me hard, right in the heart. And I said, "You needed me?" I went out to my brother's car and had a good cry. He took me to the record store and I felt better. Got that last check. I had to go look for another job. Luckily, just a few months later, my birthday came and I turned 16. And got that work permit. And it was not quite as easy to get a job as I thought. I thought once you had the work permit, you just walked out onto fast food row and held it up. You know, they like throw their doors open. "Quick, come in, try things." "We've been waiting for you." But no, that's not the way it works. You have to actually apply for jobs and you have to give them references and they want you to have experience. And they don't teach you in school. They teach you all kinds of useless stuff, but they don't teach you how to get around that little troublesome thing where you have to have experience to get a job, but you have to get a job to get experience. No one told me. Please tell the kids. They don't let me talk to them. So you tell the children they don't know. You're supposed to lie. You guys know, right? You could all afford this show tonight. The tickets weren't cheap. You figured out. You lie on applications. You lie on resumes. You don't let someone else decide how far you're going in this world. You let your imagination be the only thing that decides how far you're going in this world. I loved filling out applications. The personal references were my favorite. Every person I would put down was a doctor, a lawyer, president of the United States, back when that still meant something, you know. And for phone numbers, I'd have a blast. You know, my neighbor across the street that sold drugs, I like talking to him, you know. Number I got from a bathroom wall, said there would be a good time there. They deserve a good time. Hope they call. Here's the thing, you can lie because it doesn't matter. They're not going to call. They're not going to call unless they are. In which case, some HR person was sitting there with a whole stack of applications and they decided to go through and call every phone number of every personal reference on every one. Trust me, you do not want to work for an uptight jerk like that. You just dodged a bullet. You're welcome. But on the flip side, people, if you get a wrong number call to your cell phone and you answer it and they ask you for a reference on someone you've never heard of, you give them a good reference, okay? We're all in this together. Who's that, Keith? Oh yeah, no, Keith's the best. Yeah, you should hire Keith. In fact, don't hire him, send him back to us. We'll take him back, he's great. What did Keith do here? You know, really, what didn't Keith do? You know what I'm saying? That guy, this jack of all trades, that guy, he's great. Listen, I'd love to stay and talk about Keith with you, one of my favorite subjects, but I gotta get going because we are incredibly busy, as we have been since that day that we hired Keith. Thank you very much. I'm out hitting the street, I'm applying, I'm not lying well enough yet, had not learned. And finally, Carl's Jr. calls me in for an interview. And I thought, I got this. Put on my job search sweater, went down there. They weren't just interviewing me, they were interviewing everyone who had applied that week. Yeah, and they had us all in line. I was lucky, I was number 6 in line, but there are many people after me. My mom is waiting in the parking lot in the minivan listening to Christian radio. That's not making my life any easier. Dr. James Dobson out there telling her not to let me play Dungeons and Dragons or listen to good music, you know. So I wait and I'm listening on the other people being interviewed. And I'm a very judgmental kid, you know. So I hear them being interviewed and I'm just dismissing them. They talk to the first guy. I was like, oh, he talks really slow. He's out. I got it. I got these French fries. They get to the last person before they're gonna interview me and I start to worry. She's charming. She's charismatic. She makes a few jokes. It's like, these might be her French fries. Finally, they're wrapping up the interview. I'm sweating. And the interviewer says to her, hey, one last thing. I wanted to tell you, I really like your necklace. The girl says back to her, oh, thank you so much. I bought this as a present to myself last week to celebrate my first month of sobriety. And I went, you moron. I started thinking about French fries again. But then the interviewer says to her, that's fantastic. Keep going back, it works. Which I think is like official lingo. I'm like, oh no, they're recovery bonding. She says to her, I just celebrated 6 years of sobriety myself. Oh. She says, listen, you know what? I'm just gonna go and take a chance on you. You got the job. She stands up and she tells the rest of us, thank you so much for coming out, we filled the position. And people just get up and start leaving. Like we haven't been wronged. And I stand up, I say, wait a minute, what do you mean you filled the position? She says, I filled the position, I hired someone, we just had the one position open. I said, yeah, but you hired her and you didn't even talk to me. You brought all these people out and you didn't even talk to them. And she said, well, I found my person. And I said, but you didn't talk to me. You don't know me. I might be a drug addict too. What do I gotta do to get a job? I'll do it, line it up, you know? She says, get out. You can't eat here anymore either, just leave. I go back to hitting the streets. I'm discouraged. But eventually, I get lucky. I get myself a job working at Kentucky Fried Chicken. Yeah, my favorite fast food place at the time. These are the pre-vegan years. Very happy. They put me on drive-thru. They put a little headset on me. It's the first time I was ever paid to talk into a microphone. And I lasted about 3 minutes. Had a small disagreement with the manager over what's funny. I think you guys will side with me. I think that it's hilarious to hit the little button and turn the microphone on and then flush the toilet. And then right after the sound go, oh, welcome to Kentucky Fried Chicken, can I help you? He thought that this was not so funny. Pulled the headset off my head. You're back in the kitchen. I became a fry cook. I worked with Tony. I knew right away I wasn't gonna get along with Tony because he called himself Tony. Why would you call yourself Tony when you could be Anthony, which is sexy, or Antonio, right? No, I'm Tony. Hey, Tony, what's up? I didn't want to work with Tony. We started fighting right away. We fought over music. I wanted to listen to The Cure and Echo and the Bunnymen and the Smiths. Yeah. Tony wanted to listen to Metallica and some bands that sounded just like Metallica, but he swore they weren't Metallica, but I'm pretty sure he just played Metallica all the time, over and over again. Might have been the same song, for all I could tell, just on loop. And what Tony and I did is we pressure fried your chicken. If you've ever tried making chicken at home, you wonder why it's not as good as Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's because they don't just deep fry it, they deep pressure fry it, which is a special thing. We would drop a huge thing of chicken into this giant vat of boiling grease, and then we would shut it and we would lock it in. And the pressure would build up and push the greasy goodness right down to the bone. So it's moist and delicious. But to get that chicken back out of there, you've got to release the pressure, which means you have to hit a button and something comes spraying out of it that I can only describe as grease steam. And grease steam is a phrase that should not exist. And the little valve with the grease steam, which way do you think it's sprayed? That way? No, because that might damage the wall of the restaurant. Boom, right in the teenager's face. It's cool, we don't have problems with our skin. It'd be great. My goal in life is to find the engineer that designed that valve and kill them. So I'm working with Tony with our giant vats of grease. Now, as a terrible employee, I run to the back whenever I'm inspired to scribble down some words of poetry. Back there writing something Robert Smith derivative, no doubt. And then I come around the corner and I see something shocking. I see Tony, and he would appear to be standing next to the giant vat of boiling grease, holding his middle finger submerged, in the hot oil. Okay, your faces say that you want me to explain this. You want to know what the heck is really happening with Tony's finger and the vat of grease. And that's exactly how my brain felt at the time. What is this? My brain offers up, maybe Tony has a prosthetic finger. My brain says back to my brain, oh yeah, that's great, genius. We've worked with him all this time. We never noticed he had a prosthetic finger. He has shown us that finger on numerous occasions. We would have noticed. My brain says, okay, brain, then what's your solution? We're watching a teenager cook his finger? And then my mouth says, all right, brain, stop fighting with yourself. Let's just ask him, Tony, what's going on? And Tony looks up from this majestic thing and says, oh, this? It's nothing, bro. And he pulls his finger out, he shakes it off, and he gives me a good, solid look at it. And I look and I see this brown, crispy, fried up finger. And I almost pass out. The lights dim, I lose my balance a little bit. And Tony makes it worse. Tony reaches over and he grabs it and he pulls off the outer layer and he splats it at my feet. And I'm looking at this and I'm struggling to keep my chicken little sandwiches in my stomach. And I look back up at him, and I'm expecting to see a skeletal finger with a few pieces of gristle maybe hanging from it. But what I see instead is Tony smiling and a pretty normal-looking, slightly pink teenager's finger. To which I say, oh my God, Tony, you beautiful bastard, show me how you did that now. Because I loved horror movies. I was into Tom Savini and the whole splatter thing. I was like, I want in. Tony says, it's easy, bro, check it out. And he walks over and he puts his finger in the batter that we battered the chicken with. And then he goes over to the flour with the Colonel's secret herbs and spices. And he flours his finger up nice and thorough. And then he shows me his finger again. And he says, insulation. And Tony pops it down in the fryer. He says the secret is to wait until it's about as hot as you think you can take, and then go 1 second longer, and pull it up. Voila! And I go, that's fantastic. And I run over and I do 2 fingers, because I gotta one-up Tony. There you go, you bastard. And Tony and I became friends. We bonded. We bonded all the next month, deep frying our phalanges in the back kitchen of Kentucky Fried Chicken on Douglas Boulevard in Roseville, California. We did our thumbs, we did peace signs, we did the shockers.
going nuts back there. And I liked Tony. It was important to me to tell Tony that I liked him. And one day Tony's leaving at the end of his shift. I said, hey, Tony, I want to talk to you. Tony turns around and goes, oh, what's up, bro? I said, Tony, I just want you to know I really enjoyed working with you this last month. I feel like we've become friends, and I really like you. And Tony says, that's cool, bro. I like you too. Glad we worked together. That wasn't satisfying. What I wanted was to tell Tony that I loved him. Which is a very hard thing for two 16-year-old heterosexual boys to express in Roseville, California in the 80s. It just wasn't the culture to say, I love you, bro, you know? So I said it the way that we said it. I said, Tony, I want you to know that I went out and actually bought a copy of Metallica's Ride the Lightning, and that's an amazing album. I really like it. And Tony took it the way I meant it, and he said, bro. And then Tony said to me, hey, he looked around real quick to make sure no one was listening. Sometimes when you're not here, I put the Smiths on. I tell people you left it on, but I like it, bro. I like it. Morrissey feels, you know? Feels. That's as close to a hug as we were gonna get, you know? And then I pushed it one step further. I said, Tony, I think we're on the same page here. I think we both know where this is going, and I'm ready to take this to the next step in our relationship. Tony said, bro? I said, Tony, tomorrow I'm gonna come in and I wanna cook my whole hand. To which Tony said, and this is a quote, yes! 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 Dude, yes! I'm coming in early and I'm gonna set it up, dude. It will be ready. I was like, damn, I got a pit crew. This is amazing. Let's do this, Tony. Appreciated his enthusiasm. I showed up the next day, and true to his word, Tony had gotten there early. And he'd like triple whisked the batter, just whisking it till it was smooth like silk. And he'd been there sifting the flour over and over again, just getting all the lumps out of the flour, just so beautiful and smooth. And my favorite part was him chasing the day cooks away from it. Get up off of that flour, that's Keith's flour. Back off, punk. I walk in, Tony comes over, he says, bro, we got you ready, but I'm gonna put it all in the walk-in so that it's cold, which will allow you a couple extra seconds with your hand under the heat. Tony, you are a genius. Moves the stuff to the walk-in, him and I go about cooking up some food, doing our thing. We come to a little lull. Tony says to me, you ready, bro? I said, it's a good day to die. Tony gets the stuff out of the walk-in, he sets it up, and then Tony, to my amazement, walks over and takes me by the wrist. And then Tony walks me, holding my wrist, over to the batter. And Tony submerges my hand in the batter and then pulls it out. And Tony gets down on one knee and he studies it front and back between the fingers, really inspects it to make sure there's no thick spots, no bubbles. Then it gets Tony's stamp of approval. And then Tony moves it over to the flour. And Tony puts it in the flour and he so carefully, gently flours my hand. You ever watch those cooking shows and you see a chef handling a chicken breast and all the women watching are like, if only he touched me like that. That was the care that Tony put into thoroughly, evenly flouring my hand. And again, he pulled it out, he got down on one knee and he inspected it front and back. Gave it the thumbs up, said, we're ready to do this. And still holding my wrist, Tony walks me over to the fryer. And he stops just a few feet short. and then lets go, and it felt very much like a father letting go of his daughter on her wedding day. Go, claim your destiny. And there I was, standing with my beautifully battered and floured hand, holding it over a vat of boiling grease. This would probably be a good point in the show for insurance purposes to say, do not try this. For insurance purposes, not for practical purposes, because if you're hearing this and going, yeah, there's no hope, I know you're gonna do what you're gonna do, because I'm you, I get it. I'm there, I'm holding my hand over this hellscape of boiling grease. My hand, my right hand, a 16-year-old boy's best friend in the world. And I have a first-person view in my memory banks of me lowering that hand into the boiling grease, watching my arm disappear at the wrist. I can't wait for senility for that memory to kick back around. You know? Did you take your medicine, Grandpa? Did I ever tell you about the time I cooked my hand? All right, that's a no, Grandpa, that's a no. My hand is submerged, and that's when Tony leans in and he whispers to me, Keith, don't leave it down as long as you would a single digit, because it'll keep heating up longer when you pull it out due to increased surface area. And that's when I knew what love was. I remembered his warning, got pretty hot, pulled it out, I shook it so that no hot grease would run down my arm, because safety first. And then I held it up, and I looked at it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned that I wrote poetry. I've been in a band or two. I've dabbled in painting. I'm a stand-up comedian, and I have written a book. I have yet to create anything that could rival the beauty of that perfectly browned, original recipe, Kentucky Fried Hand. And I looked over at Tony, and I caught him wiping a tear out of his eye. And we knew him and I, that we were in the presence of something magnificent, something beautiful. And we knew that this needed to be shared, that this couldn't be kept between two flunkies in the back kitchen of Kentucky Fried Chicken on Douglas Boulevard in Roseville, California. No, this needed to be seen. But this was the late 80s. We didn't have Instagram. We didn't have Facebook or Twitter. Heck, taking a picture cost money. We didn't have any of those things, but what we did have was a dining room. And I hatched a plan. I decided that in my apron and my cook's hat, I would grab my hand around the wrist and I would run screaming through the restaurant. Tony says to me, bro, people are gonna puke. I said back to him, puke? Dude, I almost passed out when it was just your finger. Bodies are going to hit the floor. And this wasn't us talking each other out of it. This was us getting pumped. Let's do it. So I get ready, grab my wrist, I make my way towards the dining room. I come around the corner, and what I find is a mostly empty dining room. Because we were morons, but we weren't morons that were doing this during the dinner rush. You know, we waited. The only people left in the dining room was a father who was probably recently divorced because he had his 2 little girls with him out to fast food on a weeknight. And as I come around the corner, his back is to me, but his 2 beautiful little girls are facing me. And I'm holding a Freddy Krueger monstrosity of a hand and inexplicably smiling ear to ear. And I see their little eyes get enormous in their heads, and both of their mouths open, and neither of them can manage to scream. And they look at their father for help, but he's chasing that last little piece of coleslaw around a styrofoam cup with a spork and just not managing to get it. He's no help to them. They look back up at me, and all of a sudden my hilarious joke didn't seem that funny. So I just abandoned ship and went back on into the kitchen. Yeah, right. Not the right thing to do. Seemed like the right thing to do at the time. Only later did it occur to me how wrong of a thing it was to do. Here, little children, see mind-bending gore while you eat your dinner. Now watch me disappear slowly back into the kitchen. And please know that no one will ever believe you that this happened. I hope those little girls see this special. Jane, are you watching? It was real. We'll talk about it during visiting hours on Thursday. It happened. Amazingly, I didn't get fired for that, but I did get fired, of course. I did eventually end up working at Blockbuster Video. Yeah, I worked at Blockbuster Video on K Street in Alhambra in downtown Sacramento. They are no longer there, but I'm still around. Take your victories where you can. We were the weird Blockbuster, or as I saw it, the cool Blockbuster. All the other Blockbusters whispered about us, you know. We found out when they would come to take our shifts so we could have a Christmas party in the back. I'd be like, come on back to the Christmas party if you want, you know, if things get slow. And they're like, no. We've heard things. And I'm like, oh, there's so much more true than you know. My boss at Blockbuster Video was a notorious Sacramento drag queen. Beautiful person, name of Large Marge, who works at Faces. Yeah, cool, we got some fans. Loved working with Marge. Marge say, Keith, can I bum a cigarette? I'd say, oh, they're Camels. Never mind, I'll lick the ashtray. Marge, can I bum a cigarette? They're Virginia Slims. Marge, can I bum 3 cigarettes and some tape? We were friends. I was the worst employee ever. I'd been slowly getting worse with each job. Finally, I didn't show up on New Year's Eve, the busiest day of the year for video retail. Came in the next day, I knew I'd find the envelope. I was ready to hear the speech. Marge calls me back to his office. We sit down. But Marge is a nice person and is hesitating. Doesn't want to say, we won't be needing you anymore. Says, Keith, I like you. And I've tried to be patient. And I felt bad that I was putting Marge through this. I said, Marge, I'm awful. You should have fired me 2 months ago. Don't worry about it. Pass that check over. We're still good. Marge said, really, Keith? I said, yeah, it's great. Give me the check. Marge, thank you. Thank you so much. Slid the check over. And then I said, I can still use you as a reference, right? And Marge said, oh, God, no. I pulled out a big rubber stamp and stamped across my folder the words, not for rehire. I said, what does that mean? That means you can never work at any Blockbuster anywhere in the world, ever again. I said, surely you don't mean anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. I said, what if I'm in London and I go apply for the Blockbuster there? They will not hire you. I said, Brazil will not hire you. I went, that's cool. I'm having an international impact. I walked out of there feeling pretty good. And I kept thinking about it. Not for rehire. Ain't that something? Because by that point, somehow, I didn't want to be fired from the golf course. But I came to like being fired. I did. I enjoyed it. It was the best liberation in the world. Not only because you didn't have to go to work the next day, but because over time you got this feeling that you weren't dependent on a job, that you didn't need them. My dad worked the same job from when he was a teenager until he retired. And I watched it almost kill him. Maybe that's why. I was like, I don't need this. You know, I can stay at minimum wage. I can get by. I live downtown. We all let each other into movies for free and stuff. This is cool. So getting fired became kind of a fun thing, doing it in new and creative ways. But then I got not for rehired. That was even better. I had leveled up. Not for rehire. What a great way to ensure you never suffer the same indignity twice. Well, that became my goal from there on out. I had a lot of jobs. I was fired from 30 of them. Well, so I got a couple of them I quit because they were too slow about it. Just like, look, trust me, you won't be needing me anymore. Going this way. I worked at the Sacramento Inn Theater when Pulp Fiction came out. Sacramento Inn Theater, what's that, you ask? It was a small art theater. They're not there anymore. I still am. One more for me. Eventually, I learned how to lie bigger. You can lie your way into management. I became an assistant manager at Petco. Thought it was a pretty good job. Because pets are a magical part of your life. You invite, you can't even get along with human roommates, right? It's a nightmare. And then you invite a creature from a totally different species into your house to become a part of your family, and it works. It's incredible. I love working with people and their pets, and I especially love the people that can bond with the non-pettable pets. You know, the people that had chameleons and fish, and I learned how to set up an aquarium and tear it down. I learned all about animal nutrition and how to raise reptiles, and I didn't need to know any of that stuff because all anyone at Petco ever wanted to know from me was, how do I get my Labrador Retriever to stop eating cat poop? Not just Labrador Retrievers, but mostly Labrador Retrievers. They love the cat poop straight out of the box. Just can't get enough of it. When people come in and they're embarrassed, they gotta ask you for help. Could you help me out? I got a little problem. Say no more, right this way, because it's easily solved. Petco has a product. They have a pill that will stop your dog from eating cat poop. Here's the amazing part. You don't give the pill to the dog. You give it to the cat. Yeah, and it somehow makes their poop not taste quite so good. That's amazing. What's in this pill? Is it like concentrated Carl's Jr.? What are they doing? And knowing about that pill made me feel better about my choices in life, too. Because sure, I didn't aim to only have reached assistant manager at Petco by the time I got into my 30s. But I also drove all over the country in a Volkswagen bus and had all kinds of adventures and long, beautiful hair and had a pretty good time during a time when some other kid who didn't drop out of high school concentrated really hard on his classes, worked really hard, and probably got a scholarship, and he went to college and he studied his chemistry, and right out of college, he got a job at Dow Chemical, and you know what? It was that poor dude, not me, that walked into his cubicle one day to find a note reading, "Make cat poop less delicious." Doing all right? I don't even want to think about the research and development part of that. All right, let's get to the love story here. I met a girl, and her name was Christine. And she had green hair and a nose ring and combat boots, everything I wanted in a woman in the early 90s. It was love. It was mad love. And lived with her whole 9 yards. And then she left me to go tour around Europe with the bass player from the band Cake. Which is insult to injury, because I really love Cake. They're one of my favorite bands. I was like, really, Cake? Baby, you gotta take that from me. Like, you couldn't have left me for the guitarist from the Deftones? I don't listen to them. Had to be Cake. At the time that this all went down, I had a job at a restaurant. It was a private club. And they paid really, really well for a bussing position, like the most money you could make bussing tables at a private club. No cash was handled in the building, tips were built in, but it was also humiliating. They made us line up for an inspection every day, and we'd have to stand there and lift our pant leg up and let them see that we had the right color socks on. If they thought we might have been sneaking a stripe or two up higher, they'd be like, lift it more. And they'd walk down the whole line, and then they would turn and they'd walk back, and we'd all have to show them that we had a white t-shirt on. And then they would walk back again, and we'd all have to show them that we had a belt on. Someone told me that at one time, they would even check to make sure you were wearing underpants, but Human Resources told them that was not a good idea. So as a result, I would often skip the underpants and try to make sure they knew. Go ahead, say something. Keith, wear an apron. Let's go. Humiliating job as it was, plus I didn't want to be there because this little philosophy major bass playing guy is wooing my girl, and I want to go spend time with her. And then I'm there in the lineup one day, and the boss comes by. His name was probably Ron, usually is, and he says, Keith, your vest is missing a button. I looked down, I went, oh man, I must have popped off. You're right. As soon as I get out of my shift today, I'm going to run and get a new button, put it on there. He goes, Keith, you can't work with a missing button. And I went, oh my God, you're right. What was I thinking? What would happen? So I left, I went to the fabric store, and I bought a button and the smallest quantity of thread that you're allowed to buy and a single needle. And I went home and I sewed the button on. I showed up the next day, still not wanting to be there, grumpy, showed him my socks and my belt and my t-shirt, and he comes back by and he takes a good look at the button. Now I'm waiting for my compliment on my sewing, because my mom raised me right. And he says to me, Keith, that button doesn't match the other buttons. I said, what do you mean it doesn't match the other buttons? It's round, it's black, it's the same size. Like, well, how much is there to match? He said, Keith, the other buttons have 4 thread holes, and that button has 3 thread holes. And I went, oh my goodness, you're right. That's incredible. I will have to replace that button. I'm not even going to ask to work today. Whew, what would the customers say? Wrong button. Man, I'm glad you caught it. This could have been a disaster. As long as we have this extra button now, you can have it if you want. Figure maybe you could choke on it. Ron says, excuse me, Keith? I said, you don't really want me to repeat that, do you? He said, oh, you're fired. I was like, oh yeah, I know. You won't be needing me anymore. I'll be back in an hour for my check. Walked out. Spent my time with Christine, but she still left. I stood in that alley. I watched her drive away with Sean. She had explained to me that they weren't actually leaving together. He just happened to be going to Europe also. And so they were going to go on the same airplane after driving across country to New York in the same car. But not together, you know. I was taking it all wrong. She left, and I dedicated all my time to trying to win her back. And now rent's due, and I don't have a job. And when I said I was in love, I meant it. I fall hard. I was a mess. I was trying to get through job interviews without crying. Then I started thinking, maybe I'll just work it. Maybe I'll get a sympathy job, you know? I'd heard of sympathy sex, you know? Turns out a sympathy job is equally fictitious. I finally got a job working on a boat called the Delta King. Permanently moored in Old Sacramento because the Rolling Stones lawyer once sank it. Now it is not seaworthy. It has a restaurant and a hotel on the boat. Managed to get through the interview without crying. Felt good, bussing and waiting tables there. I was getting healthy. I was riding Christine's bicycle that she left behind, back and forth to work every day, quitting smoking, doing good stuff for myself. It was good because the smoke breaks, I now could go in the bathroom and cry. I was doing good. And my boss there, the manager, for the sake of this show, we'll call him Charlie Coyne, because that's his actual name, and I hate him. One day Charlie says to me, Keith, you hungry? And I said, perpetually. And he said, all right, we got food downstairs. I went downstairs, there's this big spread of food. I started stuffing a bunch of it in my face. I went back up to the restaurant and I told the other servers, hey, there's food downstairs. They said, you didn't just eat a Charlie Coyne buffet. I said, well, it's a Charlie Coyne buffet. They said, Charlie hates to throw food away. That's a spread that he put out for a meeting that was here last night. So this is another thing they don't teach you in school, but don't eat food that's set out in the hull of a riverboat overnight. It's bad. I start feeling queasy immediately, not sure if it's psychosomatic or what, but I barely got through my shift, rushed home, called my mom. I was still on her health insurance at the time. She got me off to the doctor. The doctor confirmed it was food poisoning, a severe case, told me not to go back to work for 2 days. And I knew I got it there because when you're poor and you work in a restaurant, that's the only place you eat. I stayed away for 1 day, decided I needed to get back to work. Went in, had my note for Charlie and everything. Got there was a little white envelope waiting in place of my time card. And Charlie wasn't there. He just left the envelope and wasn't there to tell me that he wouldn't be needing me anymore. I had no closure. I took the envelope and I marched off to Charlie's office. His secretary said he's not here. I said I need to schedule an appointment because it's illegal to poison someone and then fire them. I said, I have a note. She said, all right, I'll schedule you an appointment. Rode Christine's bike back home, rode it back down there for my appointment, locked it up outside, went in. Charlie flaked on the appointment. I waited for an hour because I didn't have anything to do. I just needed to hear that he didn't need me anymore. Came back outside, and someone had stolen the bicycle. I said, he wins. He's richer than me. He can keep going. I went home and handed my roommate the check. I was like, give that back to me. Just tell me you won't be needing me anymore. He's like, well, I never needed you. I'm like, come on, just do it. I need closure. I got 2 new jobs. I got a job at a Chinese bakery on Broadway. Not there anymore. I got a job at another coffee shop called Coffee, Tea, and Company. Not there anymore. Saved up my money, bought Christine a new bike, bought myself my first Volkswagen bus, started learning a little bit of Chinese working at the bakery. Thought, Christine's coming home to a pretty cool guy. You know? Speaking a little Chinese, got a couple of coffee shop jobs, got this cool bus. And it worked. She was impressed. She came home and right away the spark was there. We became an item again. But she felt that it would be silly to jump right back in after the way she'd hurt me. She said, let's not rush. Let's still date other people. Let's have an open relationship. Yeah, you guys know the way an open relationship works, apparently. What that meant was that she slept with other people, and I had permission to sleep with other people. It was not ideal. I did not like it. But I settled for it because I was in love and I was desperate. And then one day we're having movie night and she brings these 2 guys that she had met when they were out flyering with these bright, colorful flyers for something called Spike and Mike's Festival of Animation. I was like, I remember that. I knew that show when I lived in Riverside. My dad took me to it. You guys are cool. What are you doing up here? Their names were Doug and Holmes. And I have 2 dead-end jobs and a dead-end relationship, and I just want to leave town. And these guys travel to college towns all over the country with a cartoon festival, which had to be the 90s equivalent of running away to join the circus, right? And I say, you think your boss would hire me? And they were like, sure! And so I walked over to the phone and I called both of my bosses and said, you won't be needing me anymore. And I hung up. And then the next day, I went with them to meet the boss and get my assignment for the day and let him know that he'd hired me. So we go to this little corporate apartment out on this busy street. We knock on the door and the door opens. And that day, I met the closest thing to a wizard that I've ever met. Mike Gribble of Spike and Mike's Festival of Animation ducked his tall, lanky frame to get out of the door because none of us would come in because he smelled like death. Just a horrible, stinky man. But he steps out and he has this wonderful energy about him and this big smile. He's got a purple beard. He's wearing pajamas and a bathrobe with purple Doc Marten boots. And he comes out and he says, good morning, boys. Feel like doing a little yoga this morning? And all these raver, skater, punk rock kids that he hired to flyer are standing there hungover, like, no, please, Mike, no. And he goes, yep, I want to see a sunrise salutation. Come on, get your Kasavasana or whatever. And they're like, oh, God, and they all get in formation, and I could tell they'd been through this before. They knew the moves. Everybody got in downward-facing dog and greeted the morning and did all this stuff. Out on this busy street while commuters are driving by laughing and throwing coffee cups at us. I'm in a very bad downward-facing dog myself, and I look over and I see Mike, and he's standing there with his mug of coffee just looking over the top of it at us. And he's got this smile on his face. And I'm like, he loves this. He's just creating a little bit of chaos to start his day. And we finish our sunrise salutation, and we all line up, and he starts giving everyone assignments. You, go get Sac State. You guys, go flyer downtown. All right, you guys, I want you to get out to the suburbs. And he comes to Doug and Holmes, and he sees me, and he goes, who's this? And I said, oh, hey, my name's Keith. I work for you now. And he goes, well, who hired you? And I go, well, I did, or you're about to. And he said, no, I've got all the crew I need. I'm not hiring you. And I said, well, I'm working for you anyway. And I got in one of the company cars, and I shut the door, put my seatbelt on. And he turned to Doug and Holmes, and they were like, ooh, we watched a movie. You know? Mike says, whatever, go work. We went and worked. I worked really hard. I was good at flyering. I was born for it. Getting people's attention, getting something into their hand, convincing them it's going to be fun. This is magic. You want to come be a part of the magic? Here you go. Oh, what? You were rude to me when taking it? I knew exactly how to pull it back to give you a paper cut between your thumb and your finger. Ah! I was good at this job. Come back at the end of the day, and Mike takes us all out to see a show. And after the show, he takes us all out and buys us beers and shows us that he can beat anyone at foosball. This guy was ridiculously good at foosball. Had a great time. And afterwards, Mike says, you come with me. And he puts me in his car. I'm like, cool, he wants to meet the new employee, you know. And he drives me a couple blocks away from the bar, and he stops. And he goes, all right, you had a good time? We played foosball, I bought you beers, took you to a show. You don't work for me. All right, that was for working hard today. The guys said you hustled, get out. I said, get out? You just drove me away from my house. He said, I know. I'm being mean to you, so you don't come back. All right. Open that. See you tomorrow. Shut the door. Showed up the next morning. He's like, oh, Christ. Get out of here. I ran, jumped in the car, put on the seatbelt. I told him I quit my other jobs, man. I'm doing this. I don't care if you ever pay me. All right, get out of my face. So finally, the third day I come in, he comes up to me, he says, Keith, I talked to our insurance people. I can't even hire you if I want to. We don't hire people unless they have a San Diego mailing address. I said, hey, Holmes, can I live with you? And Holmes said, yeah, totally. I was like, I live in San Diego now. Apparently, I just moved. Spent another shift working real hard. with no indication that I would ever get paid for it. Got a lot of foosball out of it. Come pulling in, and Mike has the paperwork ready for me. Fill it out. Here's a pen. I hired myself. It was a trick I did not know I could do. It was a magical job, and it started off with a magical night. We all went out to Old Ironsides, one of my favorite local bars. Me and all the flyer boys that I was now working with, we had beers, and after we'd had a lot of beers, someone came walking into the bar, someone named Charlie Coyne. And I see him walk in, and I go, hey, see that guy right there? He's a real nice guy. And my friend Juan goes, that guy's a real nice guy? I said, yeah. He's like, I'm gonna buy him a drink. And he goes over and he buys him a drink, says, I hear you're a real nice guy. Throughout the night, people are patting him on the back going, hey, people tell me you're a real nice guy. And he gets that it can't possibly be a compliment. Because nice guy hasn't been used as a compliment in a very long time, except by people who call themselves nice guys, and they're the worst. Nobody wants to date them. So he starts getting angry. I'm like, I'm picking on you by getting you free beers. Like, this is the best. Well, why can't rich people appreciate things, you know? He traces it back to me. He doesn't really remember who I am. He comes over to me and he goes, hey, I want to talk to you outside. I go, I don't want to go outside right now. If I went with anyone, though, it'd be you. I hear you're a real nice guy. And with that, he shoves me through the swinging door at Old Ironsides, which is perfect because it's like a Western. You know, I go through the door and it's swinging, and he steps out afterwards and he punches me right square in the face. Got a really good right, too. Just boom, puts me on my butt. Boom, I hit the ground. My friend Huang was outside peeing. Now, I don't know why Huang wasn't peeing inside like a normal person. But it was good because he was in the right place to see the punch, and he was just finishing up his business. Now, Huang was the world's best Street Fighter II player. I used to watch him walk into an arcade, and kids would line up to play him. They were like, the guy's here, the Street Fighter II guy. Oh, this is the night I'm gonna beat him. You know, I think he thought that the skills transferred. Huang comes running towards Charlie, and he jumps in the air, this amazing, beautiful jump. And as he's in the air, he's punching with both fists. And he continues punching as he sails right by Charlie and lands in a bush. And stays there. But it distracted Charlie long enough to keep him from hitting me anymore. Two bouncers came out and they threw him on his butt. And he got up and they said, get out of here, don't come back here anymore. Which is fair, because Old Ironsides was my bar. My band played there. That's like a dog peeing on something. I had sprayed it with my music. And I watched this guy walking off into the night, and I was like, yes, get out of here, Charlie. I won. I know you poisoned me and fired me and had a roll in my bicycle getting stolen and then punched me in the face. But I got a rich guy kicked out of a bar, and you take your victories where you can. But just in case, I prank called the boat from every single city we visited. And I would try and set up big wedding parties. I would tell him I had a bar mitzvah. And I always had different area codes for him to fax to. He never figured out it was me. I'd have him send me napkin folds and plate designs. I'd push him as far as he would go before he'd finally say, look, we need a deposit. And I would go, oh, okay. Real quick, though, I think you know my nephew. He said, who's that? A kid named Keith tells me you're a real nice guy. You son of a shit! Hang up. So working for Spike and Mike was my one time at band camp. I mean, I had amazing adventures everywhere I went. We lived on a houseboat in Sausalito, California. When we did the San Francisco show, we would go down to Haight Street and get homeless people and bring them back to the houseboat for parties. You know, We had a lot of fun. A lot of beers were drank. A lot of other things were done we don't talk about on a Clean album. We had a good time. And then eventually, the craziness went a little bit too far. And I spent the night in jail in Chicago. And I would love to tell you what for, but that's the subject of my next show, what I was arrested for. So I hope you'll come back. But I got out of jail, and I'd missed my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. I got on a plane. I had to be flown to San Diego to transfer to a flight to Seattle, where I was helping take the place of the crew that was there because they were moving up to Vancouver, BC. And wouldn't you know it, that was the day they gave me a free upgrade to first class for all the flying I was doing. I got on like blonde, dreaded out hair and a flannel shirt and one of those big, giant hippie backpacks. I looked and smelled like jail, and I walked into first class, and they were like, oh, you go back there. And I was like, nope, right here. They said so. Which is awesome, because they paid not to sit by me. But there I was, right in their face. Had a seat. I tell you, I fit in jail more than I fit in first class. Fly into Seattle, and I get to the apartment there, and the crew there were having a blowout party as they were getting ready to leave. I show up to a destroyed apartment, lots of drinking going on. I joined right in. We had a good time. I went to bed at 5 in the morning. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the other boys had already left. I woke up to Mike's face right here. He had snuck up from San Diego. There's that purple beard looking at me. What did you do to the apartment, Keith? Well, I had help, dude. You're cleaning it. Me and Dan and the one other guy left got up. We start putting trash in bags, having to actually stop and throw up in the bag and then put more trash in the bag. We're in horrible shape, but Mike is not gonna let us off the hook. He is furious. And he said, hurry up. You gotta get the apartment clean, and then we gotta catch the lunch rush at the college. And then he puts us all in our cars, and he drives me personally out to a college, sends the other guys to the other colleges, says, go, get the flyers out, hit the lunch rush. So I went in to catch the lunch rush, but instead I caught a nap, and then Mike caught me sleeping. Sitting there with my backpack next to me, sleeping, students walking by me. For the second time, I opened my eyes to that purple bearded freak staring at me. You're missing the lunch rush. And he grabs my backpack and he starts flyering the lunch crowd. And I'm chasing him going, Mike, stop, wait, I'll do it. He goes, you had your chance. And he keeps flyering him. And I've never seen him so angry. And then the lunch rush dies down and Mike goes to get in his car. He tries to lock me out, but you know I'm good at getting in his company cars before he can. Get my seatbelt on. And so Mike starts driving, but he doesn't go towards our hotel room. He heads up into the hills of Seattle. And I'm honestly convinced that he's driving me up there to kill me. That sounds far-fetched until you think about it. Think about two different things. One, who is he? He is this weird, purple-bearded guy who hangs out with a bunch of kids half his age, punk rockers and ravers and skaters, the kind of kids that no one would be that surprised if they disappeared, right? And then think about me and the trajectory I was on. I went from being constantly fired to being not for rehired to being punched in the face. Killed in the hills of Seattle is next, right? It actually makes sense. Pulls over, parks. We're looking over Seattle. And he sits there for a few minutes in silence. I'm looking for things I can use as a weapon. And Mike turns to me. And Mike tells me the story of Spike and Mike's Festival of Animation. He tells me how him and Spike worked for a concert promoter that would put on movies like Pink Floyd The Wall or Led Zeppelin The Song Remains the Same for college kids. And they didn't even have tack hammers. He wouldn't even buy them tack hammers. They would go pry the staples out of bulletin boards and then push them into their own posters with their thumbs to put posters up. And they work for the guy for a few months, and Mike saves up his money and he buys a film, a small piece of film of Porky Pig hitting his thumb with a hammer and saying a curse word. Tells the guy, hey, why don't we tag this on before the movie tonight? Guy puts it on, audience loves it. College kids are dying laughing. The guy goes, buy more of those, that was great. So Mike buys some more cartoons. The cartoon starts getting longer than the rest of the program. Spike and Mike decide they don't need the guy and his Pink Floyd. They can just string together a bunch of cartoons and do their own show. And they needed a job because right around that time they got kicked out of UC Riverside for an illegal screening of the movie Deep Throat. And then they went on to be a huge force in animation. And they launched Mike Judge's career with Beavis and Butthead. They were the first people to buy films from John Lasseter, who went on to make Toy Story and found Pixar. The character Dale Gribble is named after Mike Gribble on King of the Hill. I mean, these are giants in this business. And it started with this wacky dream while working for this concert guy. And he says, Keith, we created magic. And you knew that. You made me let you in. You made me let you be a part of the magic. And now what do you want to do? Do you want to keep being a part of the magic, or do you want to leave and go create your own magic? Because that's a perfectly respectable thing to do. Or do you want to be a piece of garbage who can be satisfied saying, ha ha, I got one over on the magic guy. I slept on the clock when I was being paid by the magic guy. Because if that's what you want to be, well, that's a little confusing to me, but you're welcome to it, Keith. And then he backed the car up and he drove back down the hill. And me and Mike got really close. You know, I would say that Mike became like the father that I never had, except I have a dad, he's really cool, he's sitting right there. So Mike became like my cool stepdad. Or more accurately, Mike became Peter Pan to me and the other Lost Boys, you know? And then we went down to Riverside, and it was mostly just me and Mike, and we hung out every night. We drove around, and we talked, and he told me, Keith, quit being such a player. I'm sure it's great to meet up with a girl in every town, but it means more to actually find a real love. And I was like, Mike, I'm not a player. I was just nursing a broken heart, but secretly inside, I was super stoked that anyone thought I was a player. No one's ever thought I was a player. I was like, me, a player? Ooh. Well, I said, Mike, I actually have a girlfriend that I want to introduce you to, who I love very much. She was my best friend for years, and now she's my girlfriend, and her name's Brenna, and she's amazing, and she's now been with me for 25 years. But she came down to Riverside, and I introduced her to Mike, and he loved her too, and he made her one of the Lost Boys, and he put her on selling merch at the shows, and we had a great time. And then we had a rap party, and Brenna was worried, and she said, Keith, Mike looks tired. And I said, that's because Mike is an old man who tries to hang out with us kids. And she said, yeah, but look at his girlfriend. She looks worried. And I said, wouldn't you be? She's hitched her wagon to that, you know? He's a purple-bearded freak. Don't worry about it. We went on a road trip, drove all over the country, her and I, in my bus. Got back to Sacramento, decided we'd make a home there. And one night my phone rang, and I answered it. And my brother Eric said, Keith, I'm calling to make sure you heard about Mike. And I said, no, what about Mike? And he said, Keith, Mike died last night. I said, of what? He said, pancreatic cancer. And we had lost our Peter Pan. But unlike Peter Pan, this one never told us not to grow up. He just told us that we could do it on our own terms, and not to be afraid of it. And I took that lesson to heart, and I went out to find my own magic out in the world, to see what magic I could make, you know? And he really touched me. Wouldn't it be a bummer if the show ended right here? I was just like, the guy died. Good night. That's not a good place to end. I'd like to tell you about the first time I did this job, stand-up comedy, which has been an amazing job. I've opened for the Wu-Tang Clan. Nobody looked at me and thought, I bet he opened for the Wu-Tang Clan. But I did. I've been to China. I've traveled all over the United States and Canada. This is a great job. And so I'll end by telling you about the first time I ever did this job. And it just so happens that it was down in Riverside working with Mike. I went to the show, And the other Lost Boys went and started drinking. I said, I'll be right with you. But first, I'm going to watch Mike introduce the show, as I did every chance I got. And Mike came up to me and he said, why do you always watch me do the show? I said, because you're amazing at it. I've loved it since the first time I saw it when I was a little kid. You get adults to play like they're children. And that's a beautiful thing, Mike. And he said, you want to do it, don't you? And I said, yeah, someday, that'd be cool. And he goes, good, because I'm not feeling it tonight. And he put his hands on my back, and then Mike shoved me onto the stage. There I was, standing on stage in front of hundreds of people at UC Riverside. And I didn't have any jokes. I don't have a set. I don't have any material. But I did have Mike's routine memorized. So I figured I better just do that. So I thanked the audience for leaving their homes. I thanked them for being willing to come out to a college campus to see a funky, hip show. I told them that it could be a magical experience if they wanted it to be one. And I told them that all they needed to do to start the magic, and if you do it with me now, they just need to get their hands up in the air. Because the magic's right there with you all the time. You just gotta wiggle your fingers and get it tangled up in them. And then pull it down on top of you. That magic's yours to keep. Thank you guys, good night.
Thank you very much.